Was there any doubt in your mind about running for re-election this time? Or?
No, there wasn't any doubt in my mind. I always thought that there would be a time when you know when it's time to quit and when it's time to keep going, and I never even came close to. There's days in this job where you go home and think, what am I doing? But most days are pretty good, and no, there was never a time, even during the first term or as the time to file approached, that I thought, no, I don't think I'll do it. So there's no doubt in my mind.
So you've got 2 terms under your belt. Do you have any new initiatives you think for the third one?
Well, the things that I'm most excited about right now are trying to get this radio situation fixed, and we think we have it. We're converting to a 800 megahertz system versus where we are right now with very high frequency VHF. So the council was good enough to give us about $1.8 million between myself and the fire department and Dan Dennehy from Disaster and Emergency Services. We went to him and said we need to get this fixed, and we did a lot of research, because what's happening around the state, and it took us a long time to figure out why it wasn't our radios, because every time we test our radios, the radios were putting out the right wattage, and it's not our car radios, it's our portable radios, the walkie-talkies. Some days they would be just fine at the same location. Like one night we had a guy got in kind of a scuffle at Lydia's with a guy in the parking lot. He said, I couldn't get anybody on the radio, I couldn't get any response, so we went out there the next day. Same radio, same spot, loud and clear.
Wow.
Could not figure out what the deal was, so we started looking around. Bozeman went to a 800 megahertz system, so we went and started asking them why they did it. And what it turns out, what's causing the issue is all the more urbanized an area gets, and of course the more Wi-Fi, cell phones, electronic equipment that start flooding into an area, the more interference it causes with the VHF radios. So that's what was getting us, and so sometimes there wouldn't be, they call it a noise floor, where your radios wouldn't work. But the car radios always did, but they're a higher wattage, so they're more powerful, so they were able to get through this. So it took us a while to figure out what it was. Bozeman went to an 800 megahertz system just within the last couple of years, and they're reporting that it's good. So we tested a couple of 800 megahertz systems. One was a company by the name of Codan, and the other was Motorola, and the Motorola system was much better and just performed a lot better in the test. And the thing about the Motorola system, it'll be able to hook onto the state trunking system, so we can talk throughout the whole state. And as an added bonus, the state's working on making that a statewide system so that they will actually handle the maintenance and upgrades of our towers and the equipment on the towers for 10 years at no cost, if we do that. So it's kind of a win-win situation for the state. They get to use our equipment and make it part of their total system. At the same time, they're going to maintain our system for us for 10 years. The other thing that's coming is we have an armored response vehicle that's coming. We've got a grant from Homeland Security for a armored rescue response vehicle. It's called a Bearcat. It looks like an armored personnel carrier, basically. It's got all the radio equipment. We can transport up to 12 people in it. So if we had an active shooter at a school or a church or something, we could get into the area without putting our people in danger. And most likely the best usage would be to get people out of there, load them into that vehicle, and get them out of harm's way quicker without risking everybody. So that's going to be a nice addition to the department. Didn't cost anything. We just put a grant together. Dan Dennehy actually played a pretty key role in getting that grant. And so it's a $300,000 vehicle that we're going to have access to. So it's going to be we're going to be a lot more ready to respond to. Hopefully we never have to use in a situation like that, but it's nice to have it if you need it. And the other thing, we do have a drone that was on that same grant, not the same cycle, but a grant, so that it's a relatively good-sized drone that we could have used, especially say, the incident across from the police department where the guy went in the building across the street and was shooting out the windows.
Right.
That would have been an excellent piece of equipment to use, because you could have flown the drone up there and looked into that window to see where he was or what he was doing without putting anybody in danger too. So there's some pieces of equipment that we're going to improve technology-wise,
Right.
that we didn't think of those 30 years ago when I started, but that's the way the wave is. So, so technology-wise, we're improving. We're going to get hopefully the radio's updated. The drone is going to be in use. The vehicle is going to be in use, and then I'll also have a $300 or $300,000 upgrade at the jail for control systems, because the electromechanical parts of the switches eventually will fail, because that system's been over there since '04 or '03, and so we're going to replace some of those controls and make it a mouse click. Right now, the detention officers have to walk around to actually turn switches. We're going to upgrade that so that it's more of a mouse click, and there's less moving around, and anytime you turn the switches, there's room for mechanical failure. And if a mouse quits, it's cheaper to replace than a big switch. So it'll be safer. And then we're going to upgrade the cameras in the jail as well. So we won't have, we're going to eliminate some of the blind spots and make it safer for the detention officers and safer for the inmates too. So between the cameras and the upgrade with the controls, it's going to be about $300,000. So those are things that we're working on and we'd like to see.
When you were initially thinking about becoming chief, what experiences led you to believe that would be good for you and the city?
Well, it takes you all the way back to when I was in college. When I graduated from Butte Central, I went to Tech for a couple of years and didn't, I got all the basic classes in, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do. At one time I wanted to be a DJ, and another time I wanted to be an occupational safety and health engineer, and never really got into anything that really interested me. And then I started riding around with the police officers, and so that's what got me interested in law enforcement, because it was an exciting job, and it was a job that never was the same twice, and I couldn't see myself sitting there in an office or which ironically what I do now. So, but you always have something happens different every day, and there's a different incident to deal with, and that appealed to me. So I decided to go to Bozeman and got my degree in criminal justice. And my dad basically told me he was going to pay for 2 more years of college, and that was it. And so I told him I was going to go to Bozeman and get a degree in sociology and criminal justice. And I remember him saying to me, well, what the hell are you going to do with that? And I told him, well, I'm going to come back, and someday I'm going to be the sheriff in Butte. And that was in 1988, and it took me till 2013 to get there. But that's what I was working for all the time, although I spent a lot of time in different. I was fortunate that I didn't spend my entire career in patrol. The patrol is a tough place, and it's really the backbone of the department. But I was able to spend 9 years in patrol. Then I spent 5 years as a school resource officer. I was able to spend, while I was a school resource officer, I was assigned to detectives. So I was in detectives for basically almost 13 years. Got to work when I was in the schools, I worked a lot of juvenile cases. When I was in detectives, I worked mostly sexual and violent crimes for about 12 years. So I got to see what that side of it was like. I was a supervisor on the street. After 6 years, I was promoted to sergeant. And then in detectives, I was promoted to lieutenant as a supervisor in there. So I had some supervisory experience as well. And then I spent 17 years on the SWAT team, which is part-time SWAT team, but we train every month, and we responded to an awful lot of incidents over those 17 years. So you get to see how things work, you get to see what works and what doesn't work. And in 2012, I started thinking, I think I have the expertise to do this. It's a big job, but I thought I could do it. And fortunately, the voters, they were thinking the same way at that time. Hopefully, they're the same way now.
Do you see any, changes coming in the community or society that you guys will have to change for?
It's funny. You think back on the time when I was elected in 2012, the biggest issue that we faced in the community was methamphetamine. And right now, the biggest issue we face still is methamphetamine, and that's disappointing to me, because when you get elected, you think, well, I can probably fix that. Well, it's not as easy as it looks or as it appears from the outside. So if you look around at the whole country, basically, is the issues law enforcement faces are mostly drug related. They're either methamphetamine or opiate, and we're starting to see opiates and fentanyl and carfentanil, those kind of things, and that's the frustrating thing. It's still the biggest problem we face. It's a little bit different because now we have opioids. In fact, all of our officers now carry Narcan, which is counteracts the effects of opiates. So generally when somebody overdoses on opiates, they quit breathing. And so if we can get there, and generally we're in the area, and we can usually beat the ambulance because our cars respond to all medical emergencies as well in case there's something that comes up. And we can administer that Narcan, generally speaking, and if they're not too far gone, we can actually get them to start breathing again because it's a pretty immediate effect, and it's a big deal. So over the past, from October of 18 until now, we've used it 16 times. Our patrol officers have used it. So those are 16 times where somebody was probably, potentially going to die, that we were able to use that and do, revive them and get them back breathing. Now the fire department carries it too, and so does the ambulance. So, but between us, that's a pretty good option to have if we can get there quick and supply them with some Narcan. It'll get them breathing again. So that's. It's amazing in Butte, Montana, 16 times we've used it.
Right.
To me, initially my thought was we'll get that in case we get an officer that's exposed to opiates a lot of times people will inhale, especially with fentanyl or carfentanil.
Oh, right.
And just a very small amount of that drug can actually restrict your breathing. So my initial thought was we'll get that in case we have an officer exposed to it. Our canine actually carries Narcan in case he inhales some fentanyl or something. And so, but we've used it 16 times over the course of, about 13 or 14 months. So those are, 16 people potentially that are walking around today that wouldn't have been if we hadn't had it. So it's
right.
been